And so the happy person that I always was really inauthentic. But as I was coming through this stuff myself and finally had the courage to go through all my darknesses and come out of them and reinvent myself to be the victor, then that victory gave me so much courage to be present and unafraid.
Welcome to Late Bloomer Living, the podcast where we're all about shaking up our ideas about what it means to grow older. I'm Yvonne Marchese, your resident age agitator and play instigator. Around here, we believe midlife is the perfect time to play, to reinvent, and bloom like you mean it. Let's go. Hello, my friend. Let me ask you, have you ever struggled with feelings that you didn't quite understand, or maybe you found yourself smiling on the outside while feeling completely overwhelmed on the inside? If so, you're not alone. And today's conversation is a beautiful reminder of that. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. It's a time to shine a light on something that affects all of us, yet it too often remains hidden in the shadows. My guest today is Irene Buchine. She's a writer, educator, and creative who has spent much of her life navigating the complexities of mental health, both personally and as a mother. Her journey through anxiety and depression, her resilience in the face of deep emotional challenges, her story makes her an incredibly powerful voice in the movement to destigmatize mental health. And that's why I'm so excited to have her here today. Irene is the author of Celia and the Little Boy. It's a children's book that gently opens the door to talking about sadness and emotional struggle in ways that are accessible, compassionate, and real. This conversation is about the courage that it takes to face your own darkness, the healing that can come from telling your story, and the reminder that we're really never truly alone in our struggles. Irene, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you, Yvonne.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So you have written this beautiful book. Let me just say, I really love this book. The artwork, which is yours, it's just beautifully done. I think I want to start with going back to your own story of being undiagnosed dyslexic,
Mm-hmm.
because that is so powerful. And here you are with a book you've written. And
Yeah.
you became an educator. Okay, so I'm giving away the ending. Let's go back to the beginning.
Well, I did not know I was dyslexic. There were no words for dyslexia back when I was in elementary school. There was just the remorse I felt being told I had to stay back in kindergarten, that I wasn't ready to go on to first grade. And because my birthday was a close one, it was like, okay, well, that's fine. She'll just repeat kindergarten. But even at the very beginning, 5, 6 years old, I felt like it was a bad thing. And
Mm.
I had no idea what I wasn't doing right. Getting on to first and second and third, because I could not figure out why words had so many symbols and why those symbols were so important. To me, they were abstracts and they didn't come together and make anything, except once in a while a sound. I would consider myself a hero to myself when I figured out the SH was sh.
Mm.
So that didn't change. I actually couldn't read. And I kept matriculating but was in pain because I was so humiliated by the fact that something was different with me. And if I wasn't able to put those letters together to make words, then the only thing left for me was to be considered stupid. And, you know, that's not an easy place to start.
I have felt stupid before. I'll say that. That
Yeah,
has come up.
yeah.
And it's not a good feeling. It's actually one of my least favorite feelings.
I respect that. Trust me,
Oh my God.
so much.
Did you feel stupid though?
Well,
Because
I
you're
can tell,
clearly not.
right, but that was a discovery. I did feel so different. If you're not passing tests and you're not keeping up with your peers, you can't seem to move along with the rest of the group. What word do you give yourself?
Yeah.
What do you tell yourself? I was just sad and lost about the whole thing, but still, which is consistent with me, is I really am a pretty hopeful and happy human being by and large. I have a great sense of humor. I think a lot of things are funny, and I very often realize other people think that's funny too. So I'd rather be on that side of life than all the things that I've carried.
Can we fast forward to when you were 19-ish? Because
Yeah,
I know
yeah.
that that was a pivotal moment for you.
At 19, I had run away from home. Well, how do you run away after high school? I mean, I left high school and it was the 60s and I was by. There's nothing in this world I can do right. I had just gotten kicked out of my first semester that I actually got into school. Don't ask me how. And it was a little school that doesn't exist anymore. And it was for teaching because I'd always taught preschool and kids. I love working with kids. So I got into the school and I was probably outstanding in the classroom, but couldn't pass one of those tests. So they had this special meeting whether or not to keep me because I probably shone in the classroom with those kids. Then they ended up kicking me out and saying, "Oh, sorry, you didn't qualify." So when I left, this is actually part of the memoir that I have written and I'm writing, but I left the school, looked across the street, and there was the Boston Commons, and it was 1968. It was a very big change in life for me because I couldn't fit there anywhere. I could not follow the path. I never could. I couldn't read. I couldn't, so many things were wrong. There was a long period where I was just out there. And sometimes I wonder how I even survived it, but I did, happily. But I was 19 when one of my return trips from California, and my mom and dad decided I really needed some help. Can you imagine trying to wrangle in a 19-year-old girl who's just so angry and so out of there? It was so hard for me, and that's just not just the dyslexia, but other things that happened to me that I had no control over when I was very young. It was not good. So there's enough reasons for me to really not care. I didn't care really. I was able to be very risky and cavalier about what life was all about because I hadn't found the path yet that it was any real success.
Mm-hmm.
I went to this office in Cambridge, Massachusetts, called Powell Associates. This was for me to get tested to see what I was most like. And I got tested, 2 days of testing, ink blots and words and all kinds of stuff. And when the testing was over, I was told by the psychologist that I was most like a music teacher, an artist, and a musician. I was tickled because that was my world. I knew that, but I didn't. He said, "You should never try to go to school. It would be a waste of money because you cannot matriculate because you cannot read." Then he told me I had a condition. I had no idea what he was talking about. So at 19 was the first time I ever heard the word dyslexia. So from that point,
He wrote you off
oh,
because
he
of
wrote me
that.
off. Yeah, it wasn't like he said, "Here's what we can do." He just did the testing, and this is what he told me.
Wow. Because now, when people are diagnosed dyslexic, if they're lucky enough to get somebody who can take them and get them diagnosed, they're going to get the support that they need through the school systems to learn how to learn
Right,
with their neurodivergence.
exactly.
But
Yeah.
what happened from there?
I had been learning how to learn with my neurodivergence, my different way of thinking.
Yeah.
But it was a different way of thinking. I had
Uh-huh.
never had the opportunity to learn from the structure provided for me. So I learned a very different take on how to absorb information, how to assess information, how to achieve goals. It just came from, I think there's a whole movement now called dyslexic thinking. It's a whole
Yeah.
big move, but the fact is that they're trying to bring dyslexia information out into the business world so people understand how can think. What I learned is I have a very unique intelligence. I have a very strong emotional intelligence, but I also have another kind of intelligence. Here I am, 76, author of a book, writing another one, and I didn't learn to read till I was 34.
So how did you learn to read?
Well, I think I was absorbing how to read because I had to get by in life. And, I worked at a shoe store. I had to be able to read the boxes. I found work. I did stuff. I think I was absorbing the English language, but was still too angry to admit that or even know that.
Mhm.
And when my husband of one of my marriages said to me, pointed out something in the newspaper and he said, "What do you think of this article?" I said, "To be honest, I can't really read it." And he said, "Of course you can." I said, "No, I can't." And he said, "Try." And so a lot of it was humiliation. I bumbled over it. I think I was just frozen
Mhm.
because I had already been working in preschool jobs and I was able to read children's books slowly to children who were non-threatening. So
Mhm.
I think I was catching on. And when this happened, I was non-threatened because it was my husband. And he said, "How about if we read the Sunday paper? Every Sunday, we'll look at it together and we'll read it together." I said, "Okay." And we started reading the paper together. Actually, it wasn't just Sundays. We started reading the paper together. And probably within 2 weeks, I was reading. Not fluently, but a reader. And from that point on, I realized I could read. And from that point on, I started trying to read books. And then I started reading books. I never read a lot of the classics because I missed that whole high school thing.
Mhm.
But I am an avid reader. And I find some really good books to read. And yeah, I think it was a huge leap for me to have the courage to read.
Wow, that's amazing. You're also an artist.
Yeah, yeah. I think one thing you can be sure, if you ever looked for me in high school or junior high school, you'd find me in the art class.
Yeah.
Because I could express myself through art, through illustrations, through drawings, since I was very young.
Hmm.
I never got directed in that way. No one said to me as I was having all kinds of other struggles, "Maybe you could have a career in the arts." That wasn't just wasn't tangible. It wasn't present for me.
Yeah. So you spent a lot of years in education, right? And then where did you go from there?
Well, let me just say that the education thing started in my 30s after I got out as, was not allowed to go through school. And then there was that big gap. And then when I was back and trying to figure the future out, my mother stepped in again with a good plan. She found out there was a program at Harvard run through Antioch College. It was an education program, and they accepted 10% of their students without undergraduate degrees. And all the years that I was not going to college, I worked with children in preschools and daycares. I went from being a teacher to what do they call it? Lead teacher to a director to another program. Ended up in Jamaica Plain where I was hands-on director of a program at the Hennigan School, and it was
Hmm.
affiliated with Mass Mental Health. So I'm learning a lot through children. And my mother found out about this program at Harvard, and I went and interviewed him because my history showed so much work with children. They accepted me and with a disability.
Wow.
It was the first time I got cut a break.
Yeah.
So in 79, I got a master's degree without getting the undergraduate
Isn't
because
that incredible?
my strengths and skills were really pretty darn good.
Wow.
So that's writing a children's book. I've always seen the world through children's eyes, even my own.
Yeah. Wow, that is tremendous. You opened a creative agency at one point, didn't you?
I did
How did
one of,
that happen? When did that
oh
happen?
God, that happened because there was a period where I just went out and started looking for work. And I saw an ad, and it was a print shop that wanted someone to help sell the printing company. And I did that, and I was really successful at it because I really like printing and I like color, and I'm an upbeat person. And after I did it for about a year, I walked into an ad agency, and some guy who was running it said, "Do you want a job here?" I said, "Okay." So I took that job and did that for about a year and a half, and then started getting involved in the production part. The production part of advertising was really interesting to me. And one thing led to another. Someone else I met along the way had a typesetting company at the time.
Hmm.
And she said to me, "You really should meet the people over there who are running a printing company because you'd be great at this." So I met people running a printing company. So these things kept getting bigger and bigger, right? It's like a little copy shop, then it was a little ad agency, and then now it's a big printing company.
Wow.
I was fascinated by everything that it did. I was fascinated by how the presses worked and how the pre-press worked, and the idea of selling it was okay for me. And you sold at the company level. You went to the big companies in the area, knocked on a door and tried to get in and say, this is what I'm selling. This is what you need. But as soon as I started meeting women like yourself who were running HR departments, they would not be creatives. And when we'd sit down to talk about what might happen, yes, I can do it in that color. I can help. This is the cheapest way to go or the most expensive. I started visualizing what they were talking about. They never had a middle person. So they didn't have, most of the time, they didn't have even design to
Mm-hmm.
accompany the printing. It was just, I need printing. Is it going to bleed? Is it going to be black? Is it going to be multicolored? The more questions I asked, the more we would start to collaborate. I said to myself, this is an opportunity where you could really enjoy yourself. So I knew women through the typesetting group. It was almost always a good woman somewhere. It was rising in the ranks by themselves. And through some other people, I met some freelance designers. I met with the designers. I trusted them. I liked them. I have a design sense because I've always been a creative. And I started hiring these designers to fill the gap that needed to be printed. I went to the printing company at one point and said, I think I need to start my own company because I'm selling your printing. You can see that I'm making sales, but I don't have a place. One of the owners of the printing company believed in what I was doing. In fact, thought he would have a good time as a writer. And I started my company, which was called Apple Graphic. We had our own space, created our own. I was the creative director. It was an outstanding 7.5 years of my life, and it was successful. And I, as a professional, as far as growing and becoming fully present in the thing I was capable of, which never had a structure before, never had a form, no one else said, by the way, you're really good at this. It was just, I was really good at this and I knew it. I loved it. I was thriving. So all that was like the most professionally, the most satisfying experience of my life. After that, it ended because my life took a lot of turns, as well as the printing company. I was in a marriage and I had just had my first child. And that actually was a celebration at the company and the printing company. Everybody was great. It was fine. But right after I gave birth, things were happening in the company that were making it difficult. I have to tell you, there's this one story that marks the most pivotal moment in my life as a woman, independent, with a baby in a career. One of my clients was Bank of Boston. It doesn't mean I had the whole company. I had one division. I
Mm-hmm.
had HR. It was always easy to work with HR because they were helpless when it came to creative work. I was doing a lot of work for Bank of Boston at the time, and I also had a baby. One of the pieces I did for Bank of Boston in the HR department ended up at the marketing department, and somebody said, who did that piece? So I'm home with the baby, thank you. And somebody up here is saying, who did that piece? I want to meet her or meet them. I get a call from the director of marketing. Can't remember her name. It might have been Lorraine Hall. And they decided they needed to meet me. Well, I only was back at work 2 days a week and I had a 3-month-old baby. So they're calling me, and I just said to the person who called, I said, I'm sorry, I'm at home with my baby. I said, I don't think I can get in there on Thursday at 2 o'clock. And she said, bring the baby. I said, really? Okay. So on that day, I dressed him in a little bow tie, little suspenders, and put him in the car, brought my briefcase, my portfolio, put me in the car. We would go to the Bank of Boston elevator. We go up the elevator with all these business suits, and they're all looking at the baby. When I get upstairs, I think it was the 7th floor, they open the doors, and I show up with the baby. This young woman named Elke, who had been a nanny for someone else, shows up at the door, and she's taking care of my son while
Wow.
I'm in the meeting.
Wow.
And so we set him down in her office. I walk to where I'm supposed to meet him in front of 7 players at the bank who are running this program that's about to start. It was for first-time home buyers. And I got the job and I created that program through my design firm and my people. As a woman coming into that situation, I was the only woman on the elevator too.
Yeah. How old were you when you had your kid?
I was 39.
Wow. So you had at this point you were reading, self-taught, basically. At what point did you get your master's? How old were you then?
That came in like probably when I was about 30,
Gotcha.
31. Because then,
Gotcha. So you got the master's, and even then weren't really a functioning reader.
no, I got it with my disability.
Blowing my mind, Irene. I love it. You're so unstoppable. I love it.
I know it's
Wow. Okay, so let's fast forward to your book. How did you end up making this beautiful book?
first, I want to say that when I was 19, I remember saying to myself, you should write a book someday. But it was about all the things that had happened prior in my life because
Mm-hmm.
they were so remarkable to me. But I didn't. And I thought to myself, that's a silly thought, girlfriend. You can't even read.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've been in therapy a lot to guide me through my life,
Mm-hmm.
which now I'm pretty much on my own, unless I need a tune up. When I was starting therapy and I met this new therapist who I liked, she asked me before I got there, she said, why do you think you need therapy now?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, because I think I am dealing with post-traumatic stress and I don't know why. So we started therapy, and within about 3 months, and I started to change a lot with the help. I said, why is this happening all now? Why now? And this is probably, I don't know, when I'm 54 or whatever. She said, you're a late bloomer. And I thought, hmm. So when you were asking me about your show, I thought I can actually say I'm officially a late bloomer.
Officially. You've been
Yeah,
declared,
I
been
have been declared
declared.
a late bloomer, and now I can attest to it.
So you going now was going to see that therapist somehow instrumental in actually writing the book?
Yes. Yes, for the first time, I was trying. I had seen therapists before, but I was trying to understand why I disassociate so much. I
I'm
wanted
going to
to,
stop you for a moment because I don't
yeah,
know if everybody knows what disassociating is. Can you explain what you mean by that or what it looked like in your life?
but what it looked like in my life was that I could blank out so much history
Mm-hmm.
and carry on as though it was not in my life, and yet it was profoundly impacting my life.
Mm,
It's like you learn to dance around the things that you really need to be straight. You can't be straightforward with your honesty because it doesn't feel like you're 100% present.
mm,
It feels like something's missing.
mm,
So through good therapy, I went back to many things that happened. I'm not going to dwell on my earliest experiences with trauma, but let's just say I'm not the only young girl in the world who's ever had very bad things happen to her before she understood what was going on.
mm,
That set a tone of disconnecting from myself. The most important years of your life in terms of development are 0 to 7. Whatever is impacting your life at that moment, those moments in time will be with you and impacting your life, good, bad, or indifferent. But they're developmental years. That's why they call them developmental years. And then they have another term for the next, you know, 5 years, and then the next 5 years, and then they go on. Different things happen.
yeah.
So as far as the question you asked was the book,
Mm-hmm.
with all the right therapy and many years of it, I could see what had been driving me and why. And I then had to learn to forgive myself
Mm,
because I only had so much control. I only had so much information. But, knowledge is power. And as soon as I understood, then I could go back, which I did. I did the hard work, and the going back part is really hard. But the going back part for me was vital. And then I
mm-hmm.
started writing because I needed to spend a little time in these new places that I had never explored before. So then I started writing memoir. Like, oh, that story, and something would pop into my head. And now the more I start writing, the more comes to you. So in the writing process, my book suddenly, Ceiling Little Boy, came to me. And it was only in 2017 that I completed that book. And I started writing it in 2014. And I was still a parent, and I was still guiding my son's future in the best way I could.
Mm-hmm.
But the story that came to me came in illustration. So I started drawing this If you even go to my website, it tells a story that I woke up one morning and this dream was in my head. It was this little girl I dreamt of, and she's on the cover of the book.
Mm-hmm.
I drew this little girl because I was writing at this point memoir in my head and illustrating. I was always needing paper by the book, paper and pencil by the bed, so I could do it, whatever I woke up with, you know. And she is what came to my mind, and I had a strong sense that I knew her. I also had a strong sense that she was distressed. So I imagined her sitting on the steps, which is exactly what the cover of that book will show you.
Mm-hmm.
It was the beginning of why she's sitting on the steps. Who are you? For 3 years, I learned about this little girl who went down the steps, was very distressed. Finally, I realized she was looking at something under the staircase that was bothering her.
Mm.
And that next step was realizing this little girl saw somebody under the steps, and it was young, it was crying, it was a child who would not respond to her plea to come out. So the story is about stepping into the dark.
Yeah.
And I couldn't step into it until I was willing to admit that I too had many dark places that I had been overcoming and overlooking and not able to look at for so many years. And so the courage of the little girl to step into the darkness represented a healthy me. That little girl, of course, is a creative nonfiction. I didn't know it then.
Yeah.
That she had the courage to step into the dark. And in my story, quite frankly, all the times a child who's angry and not feeling well will reject you for a million reasons. They will push you and shove you and whatever, male, female, you know how they are. Kids just right in your face. Get out of my face. And so the happy person that I always was really inauthentic. But it was the only one I was navigating with at the beginning of this person's life. But as I was coming through this stuff myself and finally had the courage to go through all my darknesses and come out of them and reinvent myself to be the victor, then that victory gave me so much courage to be present and unafraid. There was nothing anymore I felt that could ever happen to me other than something physical, a ceiling falling, or someone doing something terrible to me with me not prepared. I was never going to be treated inappropriately again. Never going to be manipulated, never going to be told I was stupid, never going to be directed by another human being, but that I was going to be strong as a horse, because I am. And so that movement to go into the darkness, to me, in my whole book, which you've read, is the pivotal moment when those two children are down there together. There's a place in there where it is most intimate.
Mm-hmm.
That is admitting the truth. And because I was able to admit the truth of my own darkness in this story, this child who could not face, for their own reasons, couldn't find any joy or happiness, heard me. We saw each other. We were both real suddenly. And I could say, I'm so sorry.
Mm.
You're right. It's okay. It's true. Sometimes things really do suck. As compared to no, because of the fear I didn't want to address.
Right. Gosh, yeah. I was just having a conversation today with some women in my community about that tendency that I think we all have to push away the feelings that we have deemed are unacceptable, to just not want them to be there, to want to jump right into, nope, don't do it, don't let it be happy.
Yeah, don't let them see that I actually broke down. When you think of how many things you really should be reacting to in a healthy, normal manner, but because of what happens between 0 and 7, we get sidetracked about where we stand, that we
Yeah.
have a right to stand.
Yeah. The word acceptance and oddly enough, surrender, those two words are coming up for me right now because surrender seems like, always seemed to me like giving up, giving in. But through meditation and things like that, I have discovered that surrendering is not giving in.
No.
It's really acceptance. It's an acceptance. And I think part of where I was with this podcast in the beginning was thinking, okay, this is about reinvention from the point of view of betterment,
Right.
self-improvement.
Right.
I was
That's
very
that
much,
yoga.
yes,
Yeah.
I'm going to get better.
Hmm.
And now, almost 5 years later, I have come to a whole new place about reinvention that it is not about making myself a better version of myself. It's about accepting myself. It's about truly like going, okay, no, this person right here, she's
Hmm.
already enough.
Amen.
And that's true for
Yeah,
everybody.
it is true.
You already have everything you need to be joyful, to live your best life. It's just finding your own way to it.
Well, I agree that we all absolutely 100% have everything we need, but it's not always accessible. And
No.
if it's not accessible, then you can say, I'm okay right here, right now, but you're kidding yourself because you could be thinking it's all fine. I mean, there were phases where I definitely thought, now I got it. Now I'm good, but it's almost like layers and layers
Yes, it
and
is
layers.
not one and done. It
It is
isn't.
not one and done.
And there's just no shame in getting help. Sometimes you can't access that person inside that is there. I feel like Celia is that part of you that sees the bright side, and the little boy is maybe the side that
Couldn't.
Celia
Hmm.
needed
Hmm.
to help come out. It's
Right,
interesting.
right,
Wow.
right.
Deep.
Yeah,
I want to say too that this is really, I know I've said it already, it's a beautiful book. I love the way it's all put together in black and white. Some of the pages are in black with white typesetting, and it's
yeah,
elegant. I know it's a children's book, but I think this is a great book. It's little. I mean, you can read it in a sitting,
yeah, yeah,
and it's worth going back to, you know?
yeah.
There's something
So much
powerful
in it.
there.
I know. I designed it to be very small because I think it's an intimate story.
Hmm.
Someone said to me, well, because I'm in independent self-published, which is like the most difficult thing in the world to be an author that way. It's just exhausting because there's so much I always have to be thinking about. Someone said, well, why don't you just change the format? I said, this is not a big picture book that everybody should look at in a classroom. This is something a parent would be sitting close to a child, or a child would be sitting alone and
Hmm.
taking it in. That's why it is so small. And that was intentional. Yeah.
Beautifully done.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for sharing that part of yourself with us.
It was deep. I didn't know where we were going, although I trusted you and I trusted that I would go where I need to go.
Yeah.
I'm glad we had the opportunity.
I so appreciate it. I think when we can share authentically from all the places of ourselves with
Right,
other people, it gives other
right.
people permission to do the same. And then there's a lot of healing that can happen.
I agree 100%. I want to thank you, and hopefully there's something in this that will help someone else realize that becoming okay is a process
Mm.
and you have a whole life to get there. It won't
Ex-
show up tomorrow. And I'm
and,
grateful.
and I honestly, I don't know if there's any getting there. I think that maybe our time here is meant to be that
There's that
is
too,
the
right?
getting there, and
Right.
it's never ending, and that's another kind of surrender of mine these days. I want to be done, but if I was done, then why am I still here?
Right. To your point, I'm officially working on my memoir. So
Mhm.
that will be my next book whenever I can get it done. And I've been working on it since 2006. So it's not like I haven't been working on it.
These things take time.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
But I keep, I always have phases where I think I'm done and I'm not.
yeah.
I'm just not. So whatever.
So how can people find you and your book?
Anytime anyone wants to reach me, they can reach me at irenebuchine.com. That's where you'll learn all about my book. You can also get the book through my website. It's not on Amazon anymore. It was, but then I had to manage it and it was really hard to manage. You can get it through me, which is through the website, and my phone number is probably on there, my email's on there, and I am, I'm available. I do a lot of speaking to parents around children with depression and how to work with that and learn to live through it and experience ways to grow.
Yeah.
And I also am in libraries. I'm all over the place. So if you have an interest in having me join you somewhere, I'd be happy to make that happen.
Thank you, Irene. I really appreciate your time. It was great to talk to you again.
Likewise, likewise.
Well, there you have it. Thanks so much for listening. If there's one thing I hope you got out of today's episode, it's that healing and reinvention don't follow a timeline. Be patient with yourself. If you want more information about Irene Buchine or want to see if you can get a copy of her book, you can find a link to her website in the show notes. Just go to latebloomerliving.com/podcast and look for episode 232. And if you are ready to bring more joy and lightness to your life, I'd love to invite you to join the waitlist for my next Play Shop. It's a fun, interactive way to ease stress and reconnect with your playful side at any age. You can sign up at latebloomerliving.com/play. And until next time, bloom like you mean it, my friend.